Today I read one of the great book, The Secret of the NÅGAS, Book 2 of the Shiva Trilogy by Amish. Chapter 1, The Strange Demon. Sati, screamed Shiva as he rapidly drew his sword and started springing towards his wife, pulling his shield forward as he ran. "She will run into a trap. Stop," yelled Shiva, picking up his pace as he saw her dash in the cluster of trees alongside the road leading to the Ramajanmabhoomi temple in Ayodhya. Sati was totally focused on chasing the retreating hooded Naga, her sword drawn and held far from her body, like a seasoned warrior with her pretty in sight. It took a few moments for Shiva to catch up with Sati to ascertain that she was safe. As they continued to give chase, Shiva's focus shifted to the Naga. He was shocked. How did that dog move so far ahead? The Naga, showing surprisingly agility, was effortlessly navigating between the trees and undulating ground of the hillside. Picking up pace, Shiva remembered battling with the Naga at the Brahma temple of Meru. When he had met Sati for the first time, his slow leg movement at the Brahma temple were just a battle strategy. Shiva flipped his shield, clipping it onto his back to get room to run faster. Sati was keeping pace to his left. She suddenly made a grounding sound and pointing to the right, to a fork in the path that was coming up. Shiva nodded. They would split up and try to cut off the Naga from opposite and on the narrow ridge ahead. Shiva dashed to his right with a renewed burst of speed, sword at the ready. Sati stayed her course behind the Naga, running equally hard. The ground beneath Shiva's feet on the new path had evened out and he managed to cover the distance rapidly. He noticed that the Naga had pulled his shield into his right hand, the wrong hand for defense. Shiva frowned, quickly coming up to the Naga's right, the Sati still some distance away. Shiva reached with his left hand, drew a knife and flung it at the Naga's neck. A stunned Shiva then saw a magnificent maneuver that he hadn't imagined possible. Without turning to look at the knife or even breaking a step, the Naga pulled his shield forward in the path of the knife. With the knife safely bouncing off the field, the Naga effortlessly let the shield clip onto his back, maintaining his pace. Shiva gaped in awe, his speed slackening. He blocked the knife without even looking at it. Who the hell is this man? Sati, meanwhile, had maintained her pace, edging closer to the Naga as Shiva ran in from the other trail into the path that the Naga was on. Seeing Sati cross the narrow ridge, Shiva picked up speed, closing in on his wife. Because of the steep angle of the sloping ridge, he could see the Naga further ahead, reaching the wall at the bottom of the hill. The wall protected the Ramajanmabhoomi temple at the base from animal attacks and trespassers. The height of the wall gave Shiva hope. There was no way the Naga could jump over it. He could have to climb, giving Sati and him the crucial second needed to catch up and mount an attack. The Naga came to the same realization as well. As he neared the wall, he pirouetted on his heels, hands reaching to his sides, drawing out two swords. The sword in his right hand was a traditional long sword, glinting in the evening sun. The one is in his left, a short sword with a strange double blade mounted on a central pivot. At the hilt, Shiva pulled his shield forward as he neared the Naga. Sati attacked the Naga from his right. The Naga swung the long sword hard, forcing Sati to step back. With Sati on the back foot, the Naga swayed with his left hand, making Shiva duck to avoid a strike. As the Naga's sword swept safely away, Shiva jumped high and struck down from his height, a blow almost impossible to defend if the opponent is not holding a shield. The Naga, however, effortlessly stepped back, avoiding the strike, while thrusting forward with his short sword, putting Shiva on the back foot. The Nilkanth had to quickly swing his shield up to deflect the blow. Sati again moved forward, her sword forcing the Naga back. Reaching behind with her left hand, she pulled out a knife and threw it. The Naga bent his head at the exact moment, letting the knife sail harmlessly into the wall. Shiva and Sati were yet to get a single strike on the Naga, but he was progressively being forced to retreat. It was a matter of time before he would be pinned against the wall. By the holy lake, finally have him. And then the Naga swung ferociously with his left hand. The sword was too short to reach Shiva, and it appeared to be a wasted maneuver. Shiva pushed forward, confident he would strike at the Naga on his torso, but the Naga swung back. This time, his thumb pressing a lever on the pivot of the short sword. One of the tin blades suddenly extended beyond the length of the other, doubling the reach of the sword. The blade cut Shiva on his shoulder. Its poisoned edge sent a jolt of electricity through his body, immobilizing him. Shiva screamed Sati as she sunk down on the sword in the Naga's right hand, hoping to knock the blade out. Moments before the impact, the Naga dropping his long sword, causing Sati to lurch, her sword slipping out of her hand as they struggled to regain her balance. No, screamed Shiva, helpless on his back, unable to move. He had noticed that Sati had forgotten the knife Sati had flung at the Naga when he had been discovered hiding behind a tree at the Ramajanmabhoomi temple was tied to his right hand. The Naga swept with his right hand at the falling Sati's abdomen. Sati realized her mistake too late, but the Naga pulled his hand back at the last moment. What could have been a lethal blow turned into a surface wound, running a trickle of blood. The Naga jabbed Sati hard with his left elbow, breaking her nose and knocking her down. With both his enemies immobilized, the Naga quickly flicked his long sword up with his right foot. He swung both his weapons into their scabbard, eyes still on Shiva and Sati. The Naga then jumped high, holding the top of the wall behind him with his hands. Sati, screamed Shiva, rushing towards his wife as the poison released its stranglehold. Sati was clutching her abdomen. The Naga frowned for the wound as just a surface nick. Then his eyes flashed wide. She is carrying a baby. The Naga crunched his immense stomach, pulling his legs up in one smooth motion, soaring over the wall. Press tight, shouted Shiva, expecting a deep gash. Shiva breathed easy. when he realized that it was a minor wound, though the blood loose and the knock on Sadi's nose was causing him worry. Sadi looked up, blood running down her nose and her eyes blazed with fury. She picked up her sword and growled, "Get him!" Shiva turned around, picking up his sword and pushing it into his scabbard as he reached the wall. He clambered quickly over. Sadi tried to follow. Shiva landed on the other side on a crowded street. He saw the Naga at a far distance, still running hard. Shiva started sprinting after the Naga, but he knew the battle was already lost. He was too far behind. He now hated the Naga more than ever, the tormentor of his wife, the killer of his brother, and yet deep inside he marveled at the sheer brilliance of the Naga's martial skills. The Naga was running towards a horse tied outside a shop. In an inconceivable movement, he leapt up high, his right hand stretched out as the Naga landed smoothly on top of the horse. The knife in his right hand slickly cut the reins, freeing the tethered horse. The rearing of the startled horse had caused the reins to fly back. The Naga effortlessly caught them in his left hand. Instantly he kicked the horse, whispering in the animal's ear. The horse sprang swiftly to the Naga's words, breaking into a gallop. A man came hurtling out of the shop, screaming loudly, "Stop, thief! That is my horse!" The Naga, hearing the commotion, reached into the folds of his robe and threw something back with tremendous force while continuing to gallop away. The force of the blow caused the horseman to stagger, falling flat on his back. "By the holy lake!" shouted Shiva, sprinting towards what he thought was a grievously injured man. As he reached the horseman, he was surprised to see him get up slowly, rubbing his chest in pain, cursing loudly. "May the fleas of 1,000 dogs infest that bastard's armpits." "Are you right?" asked Shiva as he examined the man's chest. The horseman looked at Shiva, scared into silence at seeing his blood-streaked body. Shiva bent down to pick up the object that the Naga had thrown at the horseman. It was a pouch made of the most glorious silk he had ever seen. Shiva opened the pouch tentatively, expecting a trap, but it contained coins. He pulled one out, surprised to see that it was made of gold. There were at least 50 coins. He turned in the direction that the Naga had ridden. "What kind of a demon is he? He steals the horse and then leaves enough gold to buy 5 more. Gold?" surprised the horseman softly as he snatched the pouch from Shiva. "It is mine." Shiva didn't look up, still holding one coin, examining its markings. "I need one." The horseman spoke gingerly, for he did not want to battle a man as powerful looking as Shiva. But Shiva snorted in disgust. He pulled out 2 gold coins from his own pouch and gave it to the horseman, who, thanking his stars for a truly lucky day, quickly escaped. Shiva turned back and saw Sadi resting against the wall, holding her head up, pressing her nose hard. He walked up to her. "Are you all right?" Sadi nodded his response. Dried blood smeared on her face. "Yes, your shoulder. It looks bad. It looks worse than it feels." "I am fine. Don't worry." Sadi looked in the direction that the Naga had ridden off. "What did he throw at that horseman?" "A pouch full of this," said Shiva as he showed the coin to Sadi. "He threw gold coins?" Shiva nodded. Sadi frowned and shook her head. She took a closer look at the coin. It had the face of a strange man with a crown on his head. Strange, because unlike a Naga, he had no deformity. He looks like a king of some kind, said Sati, wiping some blood off her mouth. But look at these odd markings, said Shiva as he flipped the coin. It had a small symbol of a horizontal crescent moon, but the bizarre part was the network of lines running across the coin. Two crooked lines joined in the middle in the shape of an irregular nun cone, and then they broke up into a spidery network. I can understand the moon, but what do these line symbols? Looked Sati. I don't know, admitted Shiva, but he did know one thing clearly. His gut instinct was unambiguous. Find the Nagas. They are your path to discovering evil. Find the Nagas. Sati could almost read his husband's mind. Let us get the distractions out of the way then. Shiva nodded at her. But first, let us get you to Ayurvedi. You need her more, said Sati. You have nothing to do with our fight, asking a startled Daksha. I don't understand, my lord. You led us to our greatest victory. Now we have to finish the job. The evil Chandravanshi way of life has to end up, and these people have to be brought to our pure Suryavanshi ways. But this, your highness, said Shiva with polite firmness, shifting his bandaged shoulder slightly to relieve the soreness. I don't think they are evil. I understand now that my mission is different. Dilipa, sitting to the left of Daksha, was thrilled. Shiva's words were a balm to his soul. Sati and Parvedeshar, to Shiva's right, were quiet. Nandi and Veerabhadra stood further away, on guard but listening in avidly. The only one as angry as Daksha was Bhagirath, the crown prince of Ayodhya. We don't need a certificate from a foreign barbarian to tell us what is obvious. We are not evil, said Bhagirath, quite hissing Dilipa. He will not insult the Nilkanta. Turning towards Shiva with folded hands, Dilipa continued, forgive my impetuous son. My lord, he speaks before he thinks. You said your mission is different. How can Ayodhya help? Shiva stared at a visibly chaffing Bhagirath before turning towards Dilipa. How do I find the Nagas? Startled with scared, Dilipa touched his Rudra pendant for protection as Daksha looked up sharply. My lord, there are pure evil, said Daksha. Why do you want to find them? You have answered your own question, your highness, said Shiva. He turned toward Dilipa. I don't believe you are allied with the Nagas, but there are some in your empire who are. I want to know how to reach those people. My lord, said Dilipa, swallowing hard. It is rumored that the king of Branga consorts with the dark forces. He would be able to answer your questions, but the entry of any foreign person, including us, is banned in that strange but every rich kingdom. Sometimes I actually think the Brangas pay tribute to my empire only to keep us from entering their land, not because they are scared of being defeated by us in battle. You have another king in your empire. How is that possible? Asked the surprised Shiva. We aren't like the obsessive Suryavanshi. We don't insist on everyone following one single law. Every kingdom has the right to its own king, its own rules and its own way of life. They pay Ayodhya a tribute. We defeated them in battle through the great Ashwamedh Yaga. Horse sacrifice? Yes, my lord, continued Dilipa. The sacrificial horse travel freely through any kingdom in the land. If a king stops the horse, we battle, defeat and annex their territory. If they don't stop the horse, then the kingdom becomes our colony and pays us tribute, but is still allowed to have its own laws. So we are more like a confederacy of aligned kings rather than a financial empire like Meluha. Man your words, you impudent fool, ranted Daksha. Your confederacy seems as lot like extortion to me. They pay you tribute because if they don't, you will attack their lands and plunder them. Where is the royal dharma in that? In Meluha, being an emperor does not just give you the right to receive tribute, but it also confers the responsibility to work for the good of all the emperor's subjects. And who decides what is good for your subjects? You? By what right? People should be allowed to do whatever they wish. Then there will be chaos, shouted Daksha. Your stupidity is even more apparent than your immoral values. Enough, asserted Shiva, struggling to tame your irritation. Will both your highness please desist? Daksha looked at Shiva in surprised anger, seeing a much more confident Shiva not just accepting but living his role as the Nilkanth, Daksha's herdsman. He knew that fulfilling his father's dream of a member of their family being emperor of all India and bringing the Suryavanshi way of life to all its citizens was becoming increasingly remote. He could defeat the Satyavans in battle due to his army's superior tactics and technology, but he did not have enough soldiers to control the conquered land. For that, he needed the faith that the Satyavans had in the Nilkanth. If the Nilkanth didn't go along with his way of thinking, his plans were bound to fail. Why do you say that? The Brangas are allied with the Nagas, asked Shiva. I cannot say for sure, my lord, said Dilipa, but I am going on the rumors that one has heard from traders of Kashi. It is the only kingdom in Swadweep that the Brangas deign to trade with. Furthermore, there are many refugees from Branga settled in Kashi. Refugees? Asked Shiva. What are they fleeing from? You said Branga was a rich land. There are rumors of great plague that has struck Branga repeatedly, but I am not quite certain. Very few people can be certain about what goes on in Branga. What the king of Kashi would certainly have better answers. Should I summon him here, my lord? No, said Shiva, unsure whether this was another wild goose chase or whether the Brangas actually had something to do with the Nagas. Sati suddenly piped up as a thought struck her and turned towards Dilipa. Her voice was nasal due to the bandage on her nose. Forgive me, your highness, but they are exactly in Branga. It is far to the east, Princess Adi, where our revered river Ganga meets their holy river, which comes in from the northeast, Brahmaputra. Shiva started as he realized something. He turned to Sati smiling. Sati smiled back. They aren't lines, they are rivers. Shiva reached into his pouch and pulled out the coin he had recovered from the Naga and showed it to Dilipa. Is this a Branga coin, Your Highness? Yes, my lord, answered the surprised Dilipa. That is King Chandraketu on one side and a river map of their land on the other. But these coins are rare. The Brangas never send tribute in coins, only in gold ingots. Dilipa was about to ask where Shiva got the coin from, but was cut off by the Nilkant. How quickly can we leave for Kashi? This is good, smiled Shiva, handing the chellam to Veerabhadra. I know, smiled Veerabhadra. The grass is much better here than in Meluha. The Chandravamshi certainly know how to savor the finer things in life. Shiva smiled. The marijuana was working its magic on him. The two friends were on small hill outside Ayodhya, enjoying the evening breeze. The view was stunning. The gentle slope of the grassy hill descended in a sparsely forested plain, which ended in a sheer cliff of a far distance. The tempestuous Sarayu, which had cut through the cliff over many millennia, flowed down south, rumbling passionately. The sun setting gently beyond the horizon completed the dramatic beauty of the tranquil moment. I guess the emperor of Meluha is finally happy, smiled Veerabhadra, handing the chillam back to Shiva. Shiva winked at Veerabhadra before taking a deep drag. He knew Daksha was unhappy about his changed stance on the Chandravamshis, and as he himself did not want any distractions while searching for the Nagas, as had hit upon an ingenious compromise to give Daksha a sense of victory and yet keep Dilipa happy as well. Shiva had decreed that Daksha would henceforth be known as Emperor of India. His name would not only be taken first during prayers at the royal court at Devagiri, but also at Ayodhya. Dilipa in turn would be known as Emperor of Swadeep within the Chandravamshi areas and the brother of the emperor in Meluha. His name would be taken after Darshas in court prayers and both Devagiri and Ayodhya. Dilip's kingdom would pay a nominal tribute of 100,000 gold coins to Meluha, which Daksha had pronounced would be donated to the Ramajanma Bhoomi temple in Ayodhya. Thus Daksha had at least one of his dreams fulfilled. Being Emperor of India, content, Daksha had returned to Devagiri in triumph. The ever pragmatic Dilipa was delighted that despite losing the war with the Suryavamshi, for all practical purposes, he retained his empire as his independence. We leave for Kashi in a week, asked Veerabhadra. Good, I am getting bored here. Shiva smiled, handing the chillam back to Veerabhadra. This Veerabhadra seems like a very interesting fellow. Yes, he does. Veerabhadra took a puff. What have you heard about him? You know, said Veerabhadra. Bhagirath was the one who had thought of taking that contingent of 100,000 soldiers around our position at Dharmakant. The attack from the rear. What was brilliant. May have worked too, but for the valor of Drabagu. It would certainly have worked if Bhagirath's orders had been followed to the T. Really? Asked Shiva, smoking. I have heard Bhagirath wanted to take his army in the quiet of the night through a longer route that was further away from the main battleground. If he had done that, we would not have discovered the troop movement. Our delayed response would have ensured that we would have lost the war. So what went wrong? Apparently, the war council didn't want to meet at night when Bhagirath called him. Why in the name of the holy lake wouldn't they meet urgently? They were sleeping. You are joking? No, I am not, said Veerabhadra, shaking his head. And what is worse, when they did meet in the morning, they ordered Bhagirath to stick close to the valley between Dharmakant and our position, helping us discover their movement. Why the hell did the war council make such a stupid decision? Asked the flabbergasted Shiva. Apparently, Bhagirath is not trusted by his father and therefore not by most Swadevan kings or generals either. They believed he would have taken the soldiers, escaped to Ayodhya and declared himself emperor. That is ridiculous. Why does Dilipa not trust his own son? Because he believes. Bhagirath thinks he is a fool and a terrible emperor. I am sure Bhagirath doesn't actually think that. Well, from what I have heard, smiled Veerabhadra as he junked out the ash from the chillam. Bhagirath actually does think so of his father, and he is not far from wrong. Is he? Shiva smiled. And then, to make matters worse, continued Veerabhadra, the entire fiasco was blamed on Bhagirath. It was said that because he took 100,000 soldiers away, they lost the war. Shiva shook his head, saddened to see an intelligent man being rubbished by the idiots surrounding him. I think he is a capable person whose wings have been clipped. The tranquil moment was suddenly shattered by a loud scream. Shiva and Veerabhadra looked up to see a rider galloping away, while his companion, lagging far behind, was screeching loudly. Help! Somebody help! Prince Bhagirath. Bhagirath had lost control of his speeding horse and was hurtling towards the cliff, a near certain death. Shiva jumped onto his horse and charged towards him, with Veerabhadra in tow. It was a long distance, but the gentle slope helped Shiva and Veerabhadra make up the expanse quickly. Shiva rode in an arc to intercept Bhagirath's horse. A few minutes later, Shiva was galloping along Bhagirath's path. He was impressed that Bhagirath seemed calm and focused, despite facing a life-threatening situation. Bhagirath was pulling hard on his reins, trying to slow his horse down, but his action agitated the horse even further. It picked up more speed. Let the reins go, shouted Shiva, over the loud rumble of the threateningly close Arayu river. What? Screamed Bhagirath. All his training told him letting the reins go was the stupidest thing to do when a horse was out of control. Trust me, let it go. Bhagirath would later explain it to himself as fate guiding him towards the Nilkant. At this moment, his instinct told him to forget his training and trust his barbarian from Tibet. Bhagirath let go. Much to his surprise, the horse immediately slackened. Shiva rode his in close, so close that he could almost whisper into the animal's ear. Then he began to sing a strange tune. The horse gradually started calming down, reducing its speed to a canter. The cliff was coming close, very close. Shiva warned Veerabhadra. The cliff is a few hundred meters away. Shiva noted the warning. Matching the pace of his horse with Bhagirath's, the prince kept his control, staying on the horse while Shiva kept singing. Slowly but surely, Shiva was gaining control. It was just a few meters before the cliff that Bhagirath's horse finally came to a halt. Bhagirath and Shiva immediately dismounted as Veerabhadra rode in. Daman, said Veerabhadra, peering towards the cliff. That was too close. Shiva looked at Veerabhadra before turning towards Bhagirath. Are you all right? Bhagirath kept staring at Shiva before lowering his eyes in shame. I am sorry for putting you through such trouble. No trouble at all. Bhagirath turned to his horse, hitting his face hard for embracing him. It is not the horse's fault, shouted Shiva. Bhagirath turned back to Shiva, frowning. Shiva walked toward Bhagirath's horse, gently cradling its face, almost like it was a child being punished unfairly. Then he carefully pulled its reins out, signaled to Bhagirath to come closer and showed him the nail buried in the leather close to the horse's mouth. Bhagirath was shocked. The inference was obvious. Shiva pulled the nail out, handing it to Bhagirath. Somebody doesn't like you, my friend. Meanwhile, Bhagirath's companion had caught up with them. My prince, are you all right? Bhagirath looked towards his companion. Yes, I am. Shiva turned towards the man. Tell Emperor Dilipa his son is an exceptional rider. Tell him that the Nilkanth has yet to see a man with greater control over an animal, even when the odds were stacked so desperately against him. Tell him the Nilkanth requests the honor of Prince Bhagirath accompanying him to Kashi. Shiva knew that for Dilipa this would not be a request but an order. This was probably the only way of keeping Bhagirath safe from the unknown threat of his life. The companion immediately went down on his knee. As you command, my lord. Bhagirath stood dumbfounded. He had come across people who plotted against him, people who took credit for his ideas, people who sabotaged him. But this was unique. He turned to his companion. Leave us. The man immediately rode away. I have experienced such kindness from only one person up until now, said Bhagirath, his eyes moist, and that is my sister, Anandamayi. But blood justifies her actions. I don't know how to react to your generosity, my lord. By not calling me lord, smiled Shiva. That is one order I would request you to allow me to refuse, said Bhagirath, his hands folded in a respectful namaste. I will follow my order you give, even if it is to take my own life. Now, don't get so dramatic. I am not about to ask you to commit suicide right after having worked tremendously to save your life. Bhagirath smiled softly. What was it you sang to my horse, my lord? Sit with me over a chillum sometime and I will teach you. It will be my honor to sit at your feet and learn, my lord. Don't sit at my feet, my friend. Sit beside me. The sound carries a little better there. Bhagirath smiled as Shiva patted him on the shoulder. Chapter 2. Sailing down the Sarayu. Tell Princess Anandamayi, said Parvadeshar to the captain of women's guard at Anandamayi's palace entrance, that General Parvadeshar is waiting outside. She had told me she was expecting you, General, said the captain, bowing low. May I request you to wait a moment while I go and check on her. As the captain walked into Anandamayi's chamber, Parvadeshar turned around. Shiva had made him in charge of the expedition to Kashi. Shiva knew if he left the organization to one of Ayodhya's administrators, they would probably be debating the mode of transport for the next 3 years. Parvadeshar, with his typical Suryavanshi efficiency, had seen to the arrangements within the week. The contingent was to travel east down the Sarayu on royal boats to the city of Magadh, where the river merged into mighty Ganga. From there, they would turn west to sail up the Ganga to Kashi, the city where the supreme light shines. Parvadeshwar had been inundated with insane requests from some of the Ayodhya nobility who were taking the opportunity to travel with the Nilkanth. He did plan to honor some strange appeals, like one from a superstitious nobleman who wanted his boat to leave exactly 32 minutes after the beginning of the third prahar. Others he had flatly refused, such as a request from another nobleman for his boat to be staffed only by women. The general was quite sure that Anandamai must also have some special arrangements she wanted made, like carrying a ship hold of milk for her beauty bath. The captain was back shortly. You may go in, General. Parvadeshwar marched in smartly, bowing his head, saluted as he must to royalty, and spoke out loud. What is it you want, princess? You needn't be so coy, General. You can look up. Parvadeshwar looked up. Anandamai was lying on her stomach next to a picture window overlooking the royal garden. Kanini, her masseuse, was working her magic on the princess' exotic and supple body. Anandamai only had one piece of cloth draped loosely from her lower back to her upper thighs. The rest of her, the feast for his eyes. Beautiful view, isn't it? Asked Anandamai. Parvadeshwar blushed a deep red. His head bowed. I turned away. To Anandamai, he appeared to be like the rare cobra male that bows his head to its mate at the beginning of their mating dance, as though accepting the superiority of its partner. I am sorry, princess. I am so sorry. I didn't mean to insult you. Why should you apologize for looking at the royal gardens, General? It is allowed. Parvadeshwar, a lifelong celibate, was mollified. It did not appear as though Anandamai had misunderstood his intentions. He whispered in a soft voice, eyes on the floor. What can I do for you, princess? It is quite simple, really. A little further south down the Sarayu is the spot where Lord Ram had stopped with his Guru Vishwamitra and brother Lakshman on his way to slay the demon Tadaga. It is the spot where Maharishi Vishwamitra taught Lord Rama the art of Bal and Adibal, the fabled route to eternal good health and freedom from hunger and thirst. I would like to halt there and offer a puja to the Lord. Parvadeshwar, pleased at her devotion to Lord Ram, smiled. Of course, we can stop there, princess. I will make the arrangements. Would you need any special provisions? None whatsoever. An honest heart is all that is needed for a prayer to reach the Lord. Parvadeshwar looked up for a brief moment, impressed. Anandamai's eyes, however, seemed to be mocking him. He growled softly, Anything else, princess? Anandamai grimaced. She was not getting the reaction that she had desired. Nothing else, General. Parvadeshwar saluted smartly and left the room. Anandamai kept staring at Parvadeshwar's retreating form. She sighed loudly and shook her head. Gather around, please, said the Pandit. We will commence the puja. Shiva's contingent was at Bal Adibal Kund, where Guru Vishwamitra had taught Lord Ram his legendary skills. The Nilkant was unhappy that many of Ayodhya's nobility had inveigled their way into the voyage to Kashi. What should have been a superfast 5-ship convoy had turned into a lethargic 50-ship caravan. The straightforward Parvadeshar had found it difficult to deny the convoluted logic of the Chandravanshi nobility. Therefore, Shiva was delighted that Bhagirath had found an ingenious method to cut down the numbers. Craftily, he had suggested to one noble that he should rush to Kashi and set up a welcoming committee for the Nilkanth, and thus gain favor with the powerful lord. Seeing one noble hustle away, many others had followed in a mad dash to be the first to herald the arrival of Nilkanth at Kashi. Within hours, the convoy had been reduced to the size that Shiva desired. The puja platform had been set up some 50 meters from the river bank. It was believed that anyone who conducting this prayer with full devotion would never be inflicted with disease. Shiva, Sati, Parvadeshar, Ayurvadi, Bhagirath and Anandamayi sat in the innermost circle next to the Pandit. Others like Nandi, Veerabhadra, Drabagu, Kritika and the men of the joint Suryavamshi Chandravamshi brigade sat a little further back. The earnest Brahmin was reciting Sanskrit slokas in the exact same intonations that had been taught to him by his guru. Sati was uneasy. She had an uncomfortable feeling that someone was watching her for some strange reason. She felt intense hatred directed at her. Along with that, she also felt boundless love and profound sadness. Confused, she opened her eyes. She turned her head to her left. Every single person had his eyes closed in accordance with the guidelines of this particular puja. She then turned to the right and started as she saw Shiva gazing directly at her. His eyes opened wide, reflecting an outpouring of love. Shiva's face sprouted a little smile. Sati frowned at her husband, gesturing with her eyes that he should concentrate on his prayers. Shiva, however, pursued his lips together and blew her a kiss. A startled Sati frowned even more. Her Suryavamshi sensibilities felt offended at such frivolous behavior, which she considered a violation of the code. Shiva pouted like a spoiled child, closed his eyes and turned towards the fire. Sati turned too, eyes closed, allowing herself a slight smile at the fact that she had been blessed with an adoring husband. But she still felt she was being watched, staring at intently. The last ship of Nilkanth's convoy turned round the bend in the Sarayu. With his enemies out of sight, the Naga emerged from the trees. He walked briskly to the place where the Brahmin had just conducted the puja. He was followed by the queen of the Nagas and 100 armed men. They stopped at a polite distance from the Naga, leaving him alone. Karkodak, Prime Minister to the Queen of Nagas, looked up at the sky, judging the time. Then he looked disconsolately at the Naga in the distance. He wondered why the Lord of the People, as the Naga was referred to in his lands, was so interested in this particular puja. The Lord had far greater powers and knowledge. Some even considered him better than the Naga queen. Your Highness, said Karkodak to the queen, Do you think it advisable to emphasize to the lord of the people the importance of returning home? When I want your advice, Karkodak, said the queen in a curt whisper. I will ask for it. Karkodak immediately retreated, terrified the way of his queen's temper. The queen turned back towards the Naga, her mind considering Karkodak's words. She had to admit that her prime minister was right. The Nagas had to return to their capital quickly. There was little time to waste. The Rajya Sabha, the Naga Royal Council, was to be held soon. The issue of medical support to the Brangas would come up again. She knew that the severe cost of that support was turning many Nagas against the alliance with the Brangas, especially the peace-loving ones who wanted to live their ostracized lives quietly, calling it a product of their bad karma. And without the alliance, her vengeance was impossible. More importantly, she could not desert the Brangas on their hour of need when they had been unflinchingly loyal to her. On the other hand, she could not abandon her nephew, the lord of the people. He was troubled. The presence of their veiled woman had disturbed his usual calm demeanor. He was taking unnecessary risk, like the idiotic attack on Sati and Shiva at the Ramajanma Bhoomi temple. If he didn't want to kill her, why the hell did he put his own person in such grave peril? What if he had been killed, or worse, caught alive? He had justified it later as an attempt to draw Sati out of Ayodhya, as capturing her within the city was impossible. For what it was worth, he had succeeded in drawing her out on a voyage to Kashi. But she was accompanied by her husband and a whole brigade. It was impossible to kidnap her. The queen saw her nephew move slightly. She stepped forward a little distance, motioning for Karkodak and the men to remain behind. The Naga had taken out a knife from a newly built hold on his belt. It was a knife Sati had flung at him at the Ramajanma Bhoomi temple. He looked at it longingly, letting the blade run up his thumb. Its sharp edge cut his skin lightly. He shook his head angrily, dug the knife hard in the sand and turned around to walk towards the queen. He stopped abruptly, oddly hesitant. The queen, clearly out of her nephew's earshot, willed her thought in a quiet whisper. Let it go, my child. It is not worth it. Let it go. The Naga stood rooted to his spot. Indecision weighed heavily on him. The men in the distance were shocked to see their lord in such a weak state. To the queen's dismay, the Naga turned around and walked back to the spot where he had buried the knife. He picked it up carefully, held it reverentially to his forehead and put it back into his side hold. The queen snorted in disgust and turned around, signaling Karkodak to come forward. She knew she had no choice. She would have to leave her nephew with bodyguards, while she herself would ride out towards Panchavadi, her capital. Portage charge. What rubbish! Beloved Samantak, Ayodhya's Prime Minister. This ship belonged to the Emperor of Sandeep. It carries a very important individual, the most important in the land. Samantak was in the pilot boat of Andak, Port Minister of Magad, who, unlike typical Chandravamshi, was known to turn a blind eye to everything except the letter of the law. Samantak turned to look nervously at the massive ship that carried the Nilkant. Shiva was standing on the balustrade with Parvadeshwar and Bhagirath. Samantak was aware that Shiva wanted to stop at Magadha. He had expressed a desire to visit the Narasimha temple on the outskirts of the city. Samantak did not want to disappoint Nilkant. However, if he paid portage charge for the ship, it would set a dangerous precedent. How could the emperor's ship pay portage to his own emperor? It would open a can of worms with all the river port kingdoms across the empire. The negotiations with Antak were delicate. I don't care who the ship belonged to, said Antak, and I don't care if you have Lord Ram himself on that ship. The law is the law. Any ship that ports at Magad has to pay portage. Why should Emperor Dilipa be worried about a small fee of 1000 gold coin? It is not the money, it is the principle, argued Samantak. Precisely, it is a principle, so please pay up. Shiva was getting impatient. What the hell are they talking about for so long? My lord, said Bhagirath. Antak is the port minister. He must be insisting that the law of portage charges be followed. Samantak cannot allow any ship owned by my father to pay portage. It is an insult to my father's fragile ego. Antak is an idiot. Why would you call a person who follows the law stupid? Frowned Parvadeshwar. On the contrary, he should be respected. Sometimes even circumstances should be looked at generally. Prince Bhagirath, I can understand no circumstances under which the letter of the law should be ignored. Shiva did not want to witness yet another argument between the Suryavamshi and Chandravamshi way of life. What kind of rule is the king of Magad? King Mahendra asked Bhagirath. Doesn't that mean the conqueror of the world? Yes, it does, my lord, but he does not do justice to that name. Magad was a great kingdom once. In fact, there was a time when it was the overlord kingdom of Sandeep, and its kings were widely respected and honored. But as it happens with many great kings, their unworthy descendants frittered away the wealth and power of their kingdom. They have been trying hard to live up to Magad's past glory, but have been spectacularly unsuccessful. We share a prickly relationship with them. Really, why? Well, Ayodhya was the kingdom that defeated them more than 300 years ago to become the overlord of Swadeep. It was a glorious Ashwamedh Yajna, for this was a time when Ayodhya had still not fallen prey to the wooden kings who rule it today. As you can imagine, Magad was not quite pleased about the loss of status and revenue from tributes. Yes, but 300 years is a long time to carry a grudge. Bhagirath smiled. Kshatriyas have long memories, my lord, and they still suffer from their defeat to Ayodhya. Magad could theoretically benefit from the fact that it is at the confluence of two rivers. It becomes the most convenient training hub for merchants traveling on rivers port on the Sarayu or the Ganga. This advantage was negated after they lost the Ashwamedh to us. A ceiling was imposed on their portage and trading hub charges, and then our enmity received a fresh lease of life 100 years back. And how did that happen? There is a kingdom to the west of the Ganga called Prayag. It had historically been in close alliance with Magadh. In fact, the ruling families are very closely related. And then the Yamuna changed course from Meluha and started flowing into Swadweep. It met the Ganga at Prayag, said Bhagirath. That would have made Prayag very important, asked Shiva. Yes, my lord, just like Magadh, it became a crucial junction for river trade. And unlike Magadh, it was not bound by any treaty on its portage and trading charges. Any trader or kingdom wanted to settle or trade in the newly opened hinterlands of the Yamuna had to pay charges at Prayag. Its prosperity and power grew exponentially. There were even rumors that they were planning to support Magadh in the Ashwamedh Yajna to challenge Ayodhya's sovereignty. But when my great-grandfather lost the battle to the Suryavamshis and Ram was spilled on the Yamuna to turn the flow towards Meluha, Prayag's importance fell again. They have blamed Ayodhya ever since. They actually believe we purposely lost the war to give them the devastating blow. I see, yes, said Bhagirath, shaking his head. But to be honest, we lost the war because my great-grandfather employed a terrible battle strategy. So you people have hated him other forever. Not forever, my lord. There was a time when Ayodhya and Magadh were close allies. So will you be welcome here? Bhagirath burst out laughing. Everyone knows I don't really represent Ayodhya. This is one place I will not be suspect, but King Mahendra is known to be highly suspicious. We should expect spies keeping a close tab on us all the time. He does that to every important visitor. Having said that, their spy network is not particularly efficient. I do not foresee any serious problems. Will my blue neck open doors here? Bhagirath looked embarrassed. King Mahendra does not believe in anything my father believes in. My lord, since the emperor of Ayodhya believes in the Nilkant, the Magadh king will not. Their conversation was interrupted by Samandak climbing up the ship ladder. He came up to the Nilkant, saluted smartly and said, "A deal has been struck, my lord. We can disembark, but we will have to stay here for at least 10 days. Shiva frowned. I have temporarily transferred the ownership of the ship to the place guest house owner in Magadh. My lord, we will stay in this guest house for 10 days. He will pay the portage charges to Andak from the guest house rent we pay. When we wish to leave, the ownership of the ship will be transferred back to King Dilipa. We have to stay for 10 days so that the guest house owner can earn enough money for his own profit and for portage charges." Shiva gaped at Samandak. He didn't know whether to laugh at this strangely convoluted compromise or to impressed at Samandak's bureaucratic brilliance in achieving Shiva's objective of visiting Magadh while upholding his emperor's prestige. The portage charges would be paid, but technically not by Emperor Dilipa. The Naga and his soldiers had been silently tracking the fleet carrying Shiva, Sati and their entourage. The Naga king, Prime Minister Karkod and her bodyguards had left for Panchavadi. The Naga to maintain a punishing pace, staying abreast with the fast-moving ships of Shiva's convoy. They had wisely remained away from the banks, far enough to not be visible to the boat lookouts, but close enough to follow their paths. They had moved further inland to avoid Magad and intended to move closer to the river once they had bypassed the city. A short distance more, my lord, said Vishabdibna. Then we can move back towards the river. The Naga nodded. Suddenly, the still of the forest was shattered by a loud scream. No. The Naga immediately went down on his knees, giving Vishabdibna rapid orders with hand signals. The entire platoon went down quickly and quietly, waiting for the danger to pass. But trouble had just begun. A woman screamed again, "No, please, leave him." Vishabdibna silently gestured to his soldiers to stay down. As far as he was concerned, there was only one course of action to take. Retrace their steps, take a wide arc around this area and move back towards the river. He turned towards his lord, about to offer this suggestion. The Naga, however, was transfixed, eyed glued to a heartbreaking sight at a distance, partially hidden by the trees and underbush. A tribal woman frantically clutching a boy, no older than 6 or 7 years. Two armed men, possibly Magadhan soldiers, were trying to pull the child away. The woman, showing astounding strength for her frail frame, was holding on to the child desperately. "Damn it," screamed the leader of the Magadhans. "Push that woman off, you lords." In the wild and unsettled land between the Ganga and Narmada lived scattered tribes of forest people. In the eyes of the civilized city folk living along the great rivers, these tribals were backward creatures because they insisted on living in harmony with nature. While most kingdoms ignored these forest tribes, others confiscated their lands at will as populations grew and need for farmlands increased, and a few, particularly cruel ones, preyed on these helpless groups for slave labor. The Magadhan leader kicked the woman hard. "You can get another son, but I need this boy. He will drive big bulls to victory. My father will finally stop his endless preening about winning every race for the last 3 years." The Naga looked at the Magadhan with barely concealed hate. Bull racing was a craze in the Chandravamshi areas, subject to massive bets, royal interest and intrigue. Rivers were needed. Riders were needed to scream and agitate the animal to keep them running on course. At the same time, if the riders were too heavy, they would slow down the animal. Therefore, boys between the age of 6 and 8 were considered perfect. They would strike out the fear and their weight was inconsequential. The children would be tied to the beast. If the bull went down, the boy rider would be seriously injured or killed. Therefore, tribal children were often kidnapped to slavery away was as riders. Nobody important missed them if they died. The Magadhan leader nodded to one of his men who drew his sword. He then looked at the woman. I am trying to be reasonable. Let your son go, or I will have to hurt you. No. The Magadhan soldier slashed his sword, cutting across the mother's right arm. Blood spurted across the child's face, making him bawl inconsolably. The Naga was staring at the woman, his mouth open in awe, her bloodied right arm hanging limply by her side. The woman still clung to her son, wrapping her left arm tightly around him. Vishadipna shook his head. He could tell it was a matter of time before the woman would be killed. He turned toward his soldiers, giving hand signals to crawl back. He turned back towards his lord, but the Naga was not there. He had moved swiftly forward towards the mother. Vishadipna panicked and ran after his lord, keeping his head low. Kill her, ordered the Magadhan leader. The Magadhan soldier raised his sword, ready to strike. Suddenly the Naga broke out from the cover of the trees, his hand holding a knife high. Before the soldier knew that what had happened, the knife struck his hand and his sword dropped harmlessly to the ground. As the Magadhan soldier shrieked in agony, the Naga drew out 2 more knives, but he had failed to notice the platoon of Magadhan soldiers at the back. One had his bow at the ready, with an arrow strung. The soldier released it at the Naga. The arrow rammed in his left shoulder, slipping between his shoulder's cap and torso armor, bursting through the bone. The force of the blow caused the Naga to fall to the ground, the pain immobilizing him. Seeing their lord down, the Naga's platoon ran in with a resounding yell. My lord, cried Vishadipna. He was trying to support the Naga back to his feet. Who the hell are you? Screamed the cruel Magadhan leader, retreating towards the safety of his platoon before turning back to the Naga's men. Get out of here if you want to stay alive, shouted one of Naga soldiers, lived at the injury to his lord. Bangas, yelled the Magadhan, recognizing the assent. What is the name of Lord Indra? Were you scum doing here? It is Branga, not Banga. Do I look like I care? Get out of my land. The Branga did not respond as he saw his Naga lord getting up slowly. Helped by Vishadipna, the Naga signaled Vishadipna to step back and tried to pull the arrow out of his shoulder, but it was buried too deep. He broke its shaft and threw it away. The Magadhan pointed at the Naga menacingly. I am Ugrasenan, the prince of Magadh. This is my land. These people are my property. Get out of the way. The Naga did not respond to the royal brat. He turned around to see one of the most magnificent sight he had ever seen. The mother lay almost unconscious behind his soldiers, her eyes closing due to the tremendous loss of blood, her body shivering desperately, too terrified to even whimper. And yet she stubbornly refused to give up her son, her left hand still wrapped tight around him, her body protectively positioned in front of her child. What a mother! The Naga turned around, his eyes blazed with rage, his body tense, his fists clenched tight. He whispered in a voice that was eerily calm, You want to hurt a mother because she is protecting her child? Sheer menace dripped from that soft voice. It even managed to get through to a person lost in royal ego, but Ugrasen could not back down in front of his frowning courtiers. Some crazy Branga with an unseasonal holy mask was not going to deprive him of his prize catch. This is my kingdom. I can hurt whomever I want. So if you want to save your sorry hide, get out of the here. You don't know the power of. You want to hurt a mother because she is protecting her child. Ugrasen fell silent as terror finally broke through his thick head. He turned to see his followers. They too felt the dread that the Naga's voice emanated. A shocked Vishadvibna stared at his lord. He had never heard his lord raise his voice so loud. Never. The Naga's breathing was heavy, going intermittently through gritting teeth, his body stiff with fury. And then Vishadvibna heard the Naga's breathing return slowly to normal. He knew it instantly. His lord had made a decision. The Naga reached to his side and drew his long sword, holding it away from his body, ready for the charge. And then he whispered his order. No mercy, no mercy, screamed the loyal Branga soldiers. They charged after their lord. They fell upon the helpless Magadhans. There was no mercy. Chapter 3. The Pandit of Magadha. It was early morning when Shiva left the guest house for the Narasimha temple. He was accompanied by Bhagirath, Trabagu, Semandak, Nandi and Veerabhadra. Magadha was a far smaller town than Ayodhya, not having suffered due to commercial or military success and the resultant mass immigration. It remained a pretty town with leafy avenues. Why it did not have the awesome organization of Devgiri or the soaring architecture of Ayodhya. It was not bogged down by the boring standardization of the Meluhan capital or the grand chavos of the Sodhiban capital. It did not take Shiva and his entourage more than just half an hour to get across to the far side of the city where the magnificent Narasimha temple stood. Shiva entered the compound of the grand shrine. His men waited outside as per his instructions, but only after scooping the temple for suspects. The temple was surrounded by a massive square garden, a style from Lord Rudra's land, far beyond the western borders of India. The garden had an ingeniously designed gargandum fountain at its heart and rows of intricate waterways, flower beds and grass beds out from the center in simple yet stunning symmetry. At the far end stood the Narasimha temple, built of pure white marble. It had a giant staircase leading up to its main platform, a spire that shot up at least 70 meters and had ornately carved statues of gods and goddesses all across its face. Shiva was sure this awe-inspiring and obviously expensive temple had been built at a time when Magadha had the resources of the entire Swadweep confederacy at its command. He took off his sandals at the staircase, climbed up the steps and entered the main temple. At the far end was the main sanctum of the temple, with the statue of its god, Lord Narasimha, on a majestic throne. Lord Narasimha had lived many thousands of years ago, before even Lord Rudra's time. Shiva mused that if the Lord's idol was life-size, then he must have been a powerful figure, He looked unnaturally tall, at least 8 feet, with a musculature that would terrify even the demons. His hands were unusually brawny with long nails, making Shiva think that just the Lord's bare hands must have been a fearsome weapon. But it was the Lord's face that stunned Shiva. His mouth was surrounded by lips that were large beyond imagination. His mustache hair did not flow down like most men, but come out in rigid tracks like a cat's whiskers. His nose was abnormally large, with sharp eyes on either side. His hair spread out a fair distance like a mane. It almost looked as though Lord Narasimha was a man with a head of lion. Had we been alive today, Lord Narasimha would have been considered a Naga by the Chandravamshis and hence feared, not revered. Don't they have any consistency? Consistency is the virtue of mules. Shiva looked up, surprised how someone had heard his thoughts. A Vasudev Pandit emerged from behind the pillars. He was the shortest Pandit that Shiva had met so far, just a little over 5 feet, but in all other aspects his appearance was like every other Vasudev, his hair snowy white and his face wizened with age. He was clad in a saffron dhoti and angavastram. How did you? That is not important, interrupted the Pandit, raising his hands, not finding it important to explain how he discerned Shiva's thoughts. That conversation another time, great Nilkant. Shiva could have sworn he heard the Pandit's voice in his head. The words were broken, like the voice was coming from a great distance, very soft and not quite clear. But it was the Pandit's voice. Shiva frowned, for the Pandit's lips had not moved. O Lord Vasudev, these foreigners impressive. Shiva heard the Pandit's voice again. The Pandit was smiling slightly. He could tell that Nilkant could hear his thoughts. You are not going to explain, are you? Asked Shiva with a smile. No, you are certainly not ready yet. The Pandit's appearance may have been like other Vasudevs, but his character was clearly different. This Vasudev was straightforward to the point of being rude, but Shiva knew the apparent rudeness was not intended. It was just a reflection of a mercurial nature of this particular Pandit's character. Maybe the Pandit was a Chandravamshi in another life. I am a Vasudev, said the Pandit. There is no other identity I carry today. I am not a son, or husband, or father, and I am not a Chandravamshi. I am only a Vasudev. A man has many identities, Panditji. The Pandit narrowed his eyes. Were you born a Vasudev? Nobody is born a Vasudev, Lord Nilkant. You earn it. There is a competitive examination for which Suryavamshis or Chandravamshis can appear. If you pass, you cease to be anything else. You give up all other identities. You become a Vasudev. But you were a Chandravamshi before you earned your right to be a Vasudev, smiled Shiva, as though merely stating a fact. The Pandit smiled, acknowledging Shiva's statement. Shiva had many questions he wanted answered, but there was a most obvious one for his particular Vasudev. A few months back, the Vasudev Pandit at the Ramajanma Bhoomi temple had told me that my task is not to destroy evil, but to find out what evil is, said Shiva. The Vasudev Pandit nodded. I am still digesting that idea, so my question is not on that, continued Shiva. My query is about something else, he said. He had told me that Suryavamshis represent the masculine life force and the Chandravamshis represent the feminine. What does this mean? Because I don't think it has anything to do with men and women. You can't get more obvious than that, my friend. You are right. It has nothing to do with men and women. It has to do with the way of life of the Suryavamshis and Chandravamshis. Prince Ugrasen had been killed, asked Bhagirath. Yes, your highness, said Samantak softly. The news is from a source I trust implicitly. Lord Ram help us. This is all we need. King Mahendra will think Ayodhya arranged the assassination, and you know how vengeful he can yet. I hope that he doesn't think that, your highness, said Samantak. It is the last thing we need. Their spies have been following us, said Nandi. I am sure that they have a report of our whereabouts and movements since we have entered the city. We cannot be blamed. No, Nandi, said Bhagirath. King Mahendra can also think that we hired assassins to do his son in. By the way, where are the spies? Two of them, said Drabaku, pointing with his eyes in a direction of the spies. They are quite amateurish. That three doesn't really hide them. Bhagirath smiled slightly. I could not. Surapatman, said Samantak. Everybody in Sodip is aware that the younger Magad prince is ruthless. He could have arranged the killing to claim the throne. No, said Bhagirath, narrowing his eyes. Surapatman was by far the more capable son of King Mahendra. For all his faults, the king of Magad does respect capability. Unlike some other rules, I know. Surapatman practically has the throne. He doesn't need to kill his brother for it. But how come there is no public mourning as yet? Asked Drabagu. They are keeping the news secret, said Samantak. I don't know why. Maybe to arrange a credible story to give at least some respectability to Ugrasen's memory, said Bhagirath. That idiot was quite capable of stumbling upon his own sword. Samantak nodded before turning towards Drabagu. Why does the Lord want to spend so much time in temple alone? It is quite unorthodox. That is because the Lord himself is quite unorthodox. But why are we keeping his identity secret in Magad? Not everyone who believes in the legend is a follower of the Neelakanth. Drabak, said Bhagirath. The present king of Magad does not follow the Neelakanth, and the people here are loyal followers of the king. The Lord's identity is best kept undisclosed here. You know, what makes humans special when compared to animals? Asked the Pandit. What? Asked Shiva. The fact that we work together, we collaborate to achieve combined goals, we pass on knowledge to each other. So every generation begins its journey from the shoulders of the previous generation and not from scratch. I agree, but we are not the only one who work in a pack. Other animals like the elephants or lions do it as well, but nobody does it on the scale that we do. Yes, that is true, but it is not always about collaboration. It is sometimes about competition as well. It is not always about peace. Many times it is also about war. Shiva smiled and nodded. So, the key point is that we humans are nothing individually, said the Pandit. Our power flows from all of us, from the way All of us live together. Yes, agreed Shiva. And if we have to live together, we must have a way of life, right? Yes, some method for all of us to collaborate or compete with each other. Most people believe there are many hundred ways of life in the world, said the Pandit. Every civilization thinks that it is unique in some way. Shiva nodded in agreement. But if you actually distill the way people live, there are only two ways, the masculine and feminine. And what do these ways of life mean? The masculine way of life is life by laws, laws that could be made by a great leader, perhaps a Vishnu-like Lord Ra, or laws that come down from a religious tradition, or collective laws decreed by the people themselves. But the masculine way is very clear. Laws are unchangeable and they must be followed rigidly. There is no room for ambiguity. Life is predictable because the populace will always do what has been ordained. Maluha is a perfect example of such a way of life. It is obvious, therefore, why the people of this way of life live by the code of truth, duty and honor, since that is what they need to be successful in this system. And the feminine way of life is life by possibilities. There are so absolutes, no black or white. People don't act as per some preordained law, but based on probabilities of different outcomes perceived at that point of time. For example, they will follow a king who they think has a higher probability of remaining in power. The moment the probabilities change, their loyalties do as well. If there are laws in such a society, they are malleable. The same laws can be interpreted differently at different points of time. Change is the only constant. Feminine civilization like Sodhir are comfortable with contradictions and the code for success in such a system unmistakably passion, beauty and freedom. And no one way of life is better. Obviously, both types of civilization must exist because they balance each other. How? You see, a masculine civilization as its peak is honorable, consistent, reliable and spectacularly successful in an age suitable for its particular set of laws. There is order and society moves coherently in a preordained direction. Look at the Suryavamshis today. But when masculine civilizations decline, they cause horrible turmoil, becoming fanatical and rigid. They will attack those that are different, try to convert them to their truth, which will lead to violence and chaos. These especially happen when an age changes. Changes is difficult for the masculine. They will cling even more rigidly to their laws, even though those laws may be unsuitable for the new age. Masculine civilization enforce order which is welcome when they are strong, but is suffocating when they decline. The Asuras, who were followers of masculine way, had faced similar problems when their power started waning. So when fanaticism causes rebellions born of frustration, the openness of the feminine brings a breath of fresh air. Exactly. The feminine way incorporates all difficulties. People of varying faiths and beliefs can coexist in peace. Nobody tries to enforce their own version of the truth. There is a celebration of diversity and freedom, which bring forth renewed creativity and vigor, causing tremendous benefits to society. The Devas, who were followers of the feminine way, brought in all this when they defeated the Asuras. But as it happened with too much freedom, The feminine civilization overreached into decadence, corruption, and debauchery. Then the people once again welcomed the order of the masculine. Yes, the feminine Deva way was in decline during Lord Rama's time. The country was corrupt, immoral, and depraved. People clamored for order and civility. Lord Ram assured that in us he created a new masculine way of life very intelligently to prevent unnecessary rebellions. He never decried the Deva way. He just called his rule a new way of life, the Suryavanshi path. But can you really say the masculine and feminine only exist at the level of civilization? Asked Shiva. Doesn't it really exist within every man and woman? Doesn't everyone have a little bit of Suryavamshi and a bit of Chandravamshi within themselves? Their relative influence within the individual changing depending upon the situation he faces? Yes, you are right. But most people have a dominant trait, either the masculine or the feminine. Shiva nodded. The reason why you need to know the two ways of life is because once you have discovered evil, you would have to trial your message depending on which people you speak to. You will have to convince and Suryavamshis in one manner and the Chandravamshis in another different manner in the battle against evil. Why would I need to convince them? I don't think either the Suryavamshis or Chandravamshis lack in courage. It has nothing to do with courage, my friend. Courage is only needed once the war begins. To begin with, you need to persuade the people to embark upon the war against evil. You will need to influence them to give up their attachment to evil. Attachment to evil, cried the flabbergasted Shiva. Why, in the name of the holy lake, would anyone be attached to evil? The Pandit smiled. Shiva sighed. Now what? What is the explanation for stopping the conversation at this moment? I am not ready. The time is not right. The Pandit laughed. I can't explain it to you right now, O Nilkanth. You would not understand, and when you discover evil, you would not need my explanation in order to understand. Jai Guru Vishamitra. Jai Guru Vishamitra. Chapter 4. The city where the supreme light shines. Prince Surapatman asked the surprised Bhagirath. Here, yes, your highness, said Syamantak, worried. Bhagirath turned towards Shiva. The Nilkanth nodded. The prince of Ayodhya turned toward Syamantak. Let Prince Surapatman in. Moments later, a dashing figure marched in, tall, well-built, and worthy. Surapatman sported a handlebar mustache, smoothly oiled and curled up at the edges. His well-maintained hair was long and neatly arranged under an extravagant yet tasteful crown. He wore an ochre dhoti with a white angavastram, sober for a Chandravamshi royal. There were numerous battle scars on his body, a sign of pride on any Kshatriya. He walked straight up to Shiva, went down on his haunches, and touches the Nilkanth's feet with his hand. My lord, it is an honor to finally have your presence in India. The surprised Shiva had the presence of mind not to step back. That could easily have been seen as an insult. He blessed Surapatman with a long life. Ayushman bowed. Prince, how did you know who I am? Divine light cannot be kept secret, my lord, said Surapatman, turning toward Bhagirath with a knowing smile. No matter how strong a veil one puts on it. Bhagirath smiled and nodded at Surapatman. I heard about your brother, said Shiva. Please accept my condolence. Surapatman didn't say anything to acknowledge the commiseration. He bowed politely and changed the subject. I would like to apologize to you for not receiving you with the ceremonial honor due to the long-awaited Nilkanth. But my father can be a little stubborn. That is all right. I have not given anybody any reason to honor me just as yet. Why don't we talk about what you actually came here for, Surapatman? My lord, I suppose nothing remains a secret from you. My brother was killed a few days back while in the forest with some friends and his bodyguards. There is a belief that Ayodhya may have carried out this dastardly act. I can assure you, we didn't. Started Bhagirath. Surapatman stretched out his hand, requesting for silence. I know that, Prince Bhagirath, said Surapatman. I have a different theory about this murder. Surapatman reached into the pouch tied to his waistband and fished out a Branga gold coin. It was exactly similar to the gold coin that Shiva had recovered from the Naga land of the people. My lord, said Surapatman, this is something I found near my brother's body. I believe that you had recovered a gold coin from a Naga while you were in Ayodhya. Is this similar to that coin? Bhagirath stared at Surapatman with shock. He was wondering how Surapatman knew about the Nilkanth's discovery. Rumors about Surapatman building his own spy network must be true. A network independent of the outrageously incompetent Magadh intelligence services. Shiva took the coin from Surapatman, staring at it hard, his body taut with anger. I don't suppose that filthy rat has been caught. Surapatman was surprised at Shiva's intense reaction. No, my lord. Regrettably not. I fear he may have escaped into the rat hole he emerged from. Shiva handed the coin back to Surapatman. He was quiet. Surapatman turned toward Bhagirath. This is all the confirmation I needed, Prince. I will report to the king that my brother, Prince Ugrasena, died while valiantly defeating Magadh from a Naga terrorist attack. I will also report that Ayodhya had nothing to do with this. I am sure even you don't want to. Pointless war between the two pillars of the Chandravamshi confederacy, especially not now, when we have suffered such a grievous loss to the Suryavamshis. The last comment was a jibe. Ayodhya had lost face amongst Chandravamshis due to its leadership in the disastrous war against the Meluhas at Dharmakand. Your words assuage a deep concern of mine, Prince Surapatman, said Bhagirath. I assure you of Ayodhya's friendly intentions towards Maluk, and please allow me to officially convey Ayodhya's condolence on your brother's untimely death. Surapatman nodded politely. He returned towards Shiva again with a low bow. My lord, I can see that you too have a bone to pick with the Nagas. I request you to Call me to your service when the war with this particular demon is to be fought. Shiva looked at Surapatman with a surprised frown. The prince had not given an impression till now that he loved his brother or even sought vengeance. My lord, whatever he may have been like, said Surapatman, he was my brother. I must avenge his blood. That Naga killed my brother as well, Prince Surapatman, said Shiva, referring to Brihaspati, the chief scientist of Meluha, who was like a brother to him. I will call you to battle when the time is right. Shiva's entourage left Magad quietly. Unlike any other city that Shiva had been to, both in Meluha and Swadib, there was no jamboree organized to see him off. His coming and going had been secret from most people in Magad. Surapatman, however, had come to the Magad port incognito to pay his respect to the Nilkanth before his departure. The ships sailed in the standard Meluhan convoy formation with the main ship carrying the Nilkanth and his companions surrounded on all four sides by a ship each. Regardless of which side an enemy cutter came from, they would have to fight through an entire battleship before reaching the Nilkanth's craft. A crucial role in this formation was played by the lead ship. It was the speed controller of the entire convoy. It had to sail slow enough to protect Nilkanth's ship from the front, but be fast enough to afford enough space for Shiva's ship to slip through and escape if need be. A Chandravamshi captain was in command of the lead ship, and he was doing the spectacularly inept job. He was speeding at the maniacal pace, perhaps to show the prowess of his vessel. This kept opening up a breach between his lead ship boat and Shiva's vessel. Parvadeshwar had to keep blowing the ship horn to alert the lead ship captain to slow him down. Tired of this inefficiency, Parvadeshwar had decided to travel in the lead ship to teach a thing or two to the Chandravamshi captain about the basics of the naval defense formations. Considering the task at hand, Parvadeshwar was distressed that Anandamayi had, for some inexplicable reason, dedicated to also travel on the lead ship. So, why are we slow? Asked Anandamayi. Parvadeshwar turned from the balustrade at the fore of the ship. He had not seen her tiptoe to his side. She was standing with her back to the railing, her elbows resting on it lightly with one of her heels placed on the block at the bottom of the railing. Her posture had the effect of raising her already short dhoti a fair distance up her right leg and stretching her bosom out provocatively. Parvadeshwar, uncomfortable for some reason he could not fathom, stepped back a bit. This is a naval defense formation, princess, labored Parvadeshwar, as if explaining complicated mathematics to a child unprepared to understand. It would take me a lifetime to explain to you. Are you asking me to spend a lifetime with you, you old devil, you? Parvadeshwar turned red. Well, continued Anandamayi, it will certainly not take me a lifetime to tell you something quite basic. Instead of trying to keep our lead boat agonizingly slow, Simply tie a rope of approximately the right length from here to the main ship. Then have a soldier posted at the back who signal every time the rope touches the water, which would mean that the lead vessel is too slow and should speed up. And if the rope becomes taut, the soldier can relay a signal that the lead ship should slow down. Anandamayi slipped her hands in her hair to straighten them out. You will make much better time and I will be able to get off these ridiculous small quarters into a more comfortable Kashi place. Parvadeshar was struck by the ingenuity of her suggestion. That is brilliant. I will immediately have the captain execute these orders. Anandamayi reaches out a delicate hand catching hold of Parvadeshar and pulling him back. What is the hurry? Parva, a few minutes will make no difference. Talk to me for a while. Parvadeshar turned beet red at both the corruptions of his name and Anandamayi's unyielding grip on his arm. He looked down at her hands. Anandamayi frowned and pulled her hand back. They are not dirty, General. That is not what I was implying, Princess. Then what? Asked Anandamayi, her tone slightly harsher. I cannot touch a woman, Princess, especially not you. I am sworn to lifelong celibacy. Anandamayi was august, staring at a tough Parvadeshar as an alien. Hold on. Are you saying you are a 180-old-year virgin? Parvadeshar, chagrined at the completely inappropriate conversation, turned around and stormed off. Anandamayi collapsed into a fit of giggles. Vishabdibna heard the soft footfalls. He immediately drew his sword, giving hand signals to his platoon to do likewise. Their platoon had moved deeper into the forest south of Magad after the skirmish with Prince Ugrasenan and his platoon. The Naga had been injured seriously and was not in a position to travel far. They had travelled as fast as they could without risking the Naga's life, as the angry Magadhan scoured the land for the killers of their prince. Vishwadibna hoped the sound he was hearing did not come from the Magadhans. His lord was in no state to fight or flee. Put your sword down, you imbecile, whispered a strong feminine voice. If I would really wanted to kill you, I would have done it even before you drew your weapon. Vishwadibna did not recognize the hoarse whisper. Perhaps the tiredness of long travel or the cold of winter had roughened the voice. But he certainly recognized the tone. He immediately put his sword down and bowed his head. The queen of the Nagas emerged from the trees, leading her horse quietly. Behind her was her trusted Prime Minister Karkodak and 50 of her elite bodyguards. I asked you to do just one simple thing, hissed the queen. Can you ensure the protection of your lord? Is that so difficult to do? My lady, whispered a nervous Vishwadibna. The situation suddenly got out of. Shut up, glared the queen, throwing the reins of her horse to another soldier. As she walked quickly towards the cloth tent at the center of the clearing, she entered the cramped tent tent and took off her mask. On a bed of hay lay her nephew, the lord of the principal. He was covered in bandages, his body limp and weak. The queen looked at her nephew with concerned eyes, her tone kind. Are you now in alliance with the tribal also? The Naga opened his eyes and smiled. He whispered weakly, No, Your Highness. Then in the name of the Paramatma, why are you risking your own life to save one of the forest people? Why are you causing me so grief? Don't I have enough to my plate already? Forgive me, Mosi. But haven't I already taken care of your biggest source of tension? Yes, you have, and that is the only reason why I have come in all this way for you. You have earned the devotion of all the Nagas, but your karma is still not complete. There are many things you need to do, and stopping some royal brat from that you believe is wrong does not figure high on that list. This contrary is full of repulsive royals who abuse their people. Are we going to fight every single one? It is not that simple, Mosi. Yes, it is. The Magad prince was doing something wrong, but it is not your duty to stop every person who does something wrong. You are not Lord Rudra. He was trying to kidnap a boy from a bull race. The queen sighed. It happens all over. It happens to thousands of children. This bullfighting is an addictive disease. How many will you stop? But he didn't just stop there, whispered the Naga. He was about to kill the boy's mother because she was trying to protect her child. The queen stiffened. Quick anger rose within her. There aren't too many mothers like this, whispered the Naga with rare emotion. They deserve protection. Enough. How many times have I told you to forget this? The queen replied, put her mask back on her face and stormed out. Her men kept their heads bowed, terrified of her fearsome rage. Karkodak, yes, my lady. We leave within hours. We are going home, make preparations. The lord of the people was in no position to travel. Karkodak knew that, but Your Highness. His words were cut short by a petrifying glare from the queen. It was just a little over 3 weeks when Shiva's convoy was closing in on Kashi, the city where the supreme light shines. The city has been settled along a voluptuous band of the holy Ganga river as it took a leisurely northwards meander before flowing east again. If looked at from the sky, this meander gave the impression of a crescent moon. Incidentally, the royal insignia of the Chandravamshis. Therefore, in the eyes of the Sodhipans, Kashi was the most natural Chandravamshi city. Kashi also had its own superstition. The city had been built only along the western banks of the river Meander, leaving its eastern banks bare. It was believed that whoever built a house on the eastern side at Kashi would suffer a terrible fate. The royal family of Kashi had therefore bought all the land to the east, ensuring that nobody, even by mistake, would suffer the wrath of the gods. The Shiva's ship was moving towards the legendary Asigat or Fort of 80. One of the main docking point of this thriving city. The crowd on the steps started beating their drums for the ceremonial welcome Arati. It is a beautiful city, whispered Sati, running her hand over her protruding belly. Shiva looked at her and smiled, taking her hand, kissing it gently and holding it close to his chest. For some reason, it feels like home. This is where our child should be born. Sati smiled back. Yes, this shall be the place. Even from afar, Bhagirath could make out the countenance of many Ayodhya nobles, jostling with the Kashi aristocracy, striving to raise their welcome lamps while berating their aides to hold their family penance higher. They wanted the Mahadev to notice and favor them. But the Nilkant noticed something more unusual. Bhagirath, said Shiva, turning to his left, the city has no fortification. Why, in the name of the holy lake, do they have no protection? Oh, that is a long story, my lord, said Bhagirath. I have all the time in the world. Tell me the entire tale, for this is one of the strangest sights I have seen in India. Well, my lord, the story starts at Asigat, where we are about to dock. This dock did not get its peculiar name because it has 80 steps. Either did it get its name from the small Asi rivulet that flows close by. It got its name due to an execution that took place here. In fact, 80 executions in just one day. Lord Ram, be merciful, and said, flabbergasted Sati, who were these unfortunate people? They were not unfortunate, my lady, said Bhagirath. They were the worst criminals in history. 80 members of the Asura royalty were put to death by Lord Rudra for war crimes. Many believe that it was not the exhausting battle between the Devas and Asuras that put an end to the evil Asura menace, but this sublime act of justice that Lord Rudra performed. Without their key leaders, the Asura insurrection against the Devas fizzled out. And then asked Shiva, remembering what the Vasudev Pandit at Ayodhya had told him, who said the Asuras were evil. And then something strange happened soon thereafter. Lord Rudra, the greatest and most fearsome warrior in history, abandoned all violence. He banned the use of Devi Astra that had caused enormous casualties in the Deva Asura war. Anyone who disobeyed this order would feel the wrath of Lord Rudra, who said he would even break his vow of non-violence and destroy 7 generations of the human who used any divine weapons. I know of Lord Rudra's order on the Devi Astra, said Sati, as the Meluhans were also aware of Mahadeva's ban on divine weapons. But I didn't know the story behind it. What made him give this order? I don't know, my lady, said Bhagirath. I know, mused Shiva. This must have been the moment when Lord Rudra realized the Asuras were not evil, just different. He must have been racked by guilt. But the story did not end there. Lord Rudra also said Asigat and Kashi had become holy. He didn't explain why, but the people of that time assumed that it must be because this was the place that ended the war. Lord Rudra said there would be no further killing at Asigat ever, that the place should be respected, that the spirits at Asigat and Kashi would forgive the sin of even the most sinful and guide them to salvation if their dead body was cremated there. Interesting, said Sati. The Kashi kings, who were great followers of Lord Rudra, not only banned any executions or killing at Asigat, they also threw it open for cremations for people from any kingdom, without prejudice of caste, creed, or sex. Any person can find salvation here. Over time, the belief in Kashi being the gateway to a soul deliverance gained around, and vast numbers of people started coming here to spend their final days. It was impossible for the small Asigat to cater to such large numbers of the dead. So, cremation were stopped at Asigat, and city converted another massive gut called Manikarnika into a giant crematorium. But what does that have to do with there being no fort walls? Asked Shiva. The point is that if the most influential people in Swadweep came here at the time of their death with the belief that this would be a place where their sins would be forgiven and then could attain salvation, very few would want Kashi to be destroyed or even be involved in the regular wars that raged in the Confederacy. In addition, Kashi kings took Lord Rudra's orders of non-violence to that what they believed was its logical conclusion. The royal family publicly swore at either they nor their descendants would ever indulge in warfare. In fact, they forsworn any killing, except in the case of self-defense. To prove their commitment to their words, they actually tore down their fort ramparts and built an open ring road around the city. They then erected great temples all along the road, giving it an aura of spirituality. Kashi wasn't attacked and conquered. On the contrary, my lord, continued Bhagirath, their intense commitment to Lord Rudra's teachings almost made Kashi sacred. Nobody could attack the city, for it would be seen as an insult to Lord Rudra. It became a land of supreme peace and hence prosperity. Suppressed people from across the Confederacy found solace here. Traders found that this was the fastest place to base their business. Peace and non-alignment to any other kingdom in Swadweep was actually made Kashi an oasis of stability. Is that why you find so many Brangas here? Yes, my lord. Where else would they be safe? Everybody is out of harm's way of Kashi. But the Brangas have tested even the famed Kashi's patience and hospitality. Really? Apparently, they are very difficult to get along with. Kashi is a cosmopolitan city and nobody is forced to change their way of life. But the Brangas wanted their own area because they have certain special customs. The Kashi royal family advised its citizens that the Brangas have suffered a lot in their homeland and that Kashi denizens should be compassionate. But most people find that difficult. In fact, a few years back, it was rumored that the situation came to such a pass that the king of Kashi was about to order the eviction of the Brangas. And then what happened? Asked Shiva. Gold managed too. What good intentions couldn't? Branga is by far the richest land today. The king of Branga had apparently sent gold equivalent to 10 years of Kashi's tax collections, and the evictions order was buried. Why would the Branga king spend his own money to help people who have abandoned his country? I don't know, my lord. I think we can put that down as another strange characteristic of Brangas. The ship docked softly at Asigat, and Shiva looked towards the multitude gathered there to welcome him. Parvadeshwar was already organizing the place so that Shiva could alight. He saw Drabagu at a distance giving order to Nandi and Veerabhadra. Bhagirath had already bounded down the gangway in search of the Kashi head of police. Sati tapped Shiva lightly. He turned to look at her and she gestured delicately with her eyes. Shiva looked in the direction she had indicated. In the distance, away from the melee, letting his nobles and the Ayodhya aristocracy hog the forelands of the Nilakant's welcome. Under an understated royal umbrella stood a sombre old man. Shiva joined his hands in a polite namaste and bowed slightly to Adidviga, the king of Kashi. Adidigva in turn bowed low in respect to the Nilkant. Sati could not be sure from the distance, but it appeared as though the king had tears in his eyes.